Welcome back to Follow Up Friday, the show where I take an element of this week's episode of Doctor Who and look at 5 other examples throughout the history of Who that really appealed to me. And in this week's episode, we're going to be talking about history. Now, let me be honest, when I sat down to create this list, my first thought was that I was going to be talking about historical episodes. But having looked at Wikipedia in the whole interest of doing some research for a change, I've realised that all of the episodes that I wanted to talk about didn't fall under the more strict category of historical, where the story was about the TARDIS crew being lost in history and just dealing with historical problems, so much as I wanted to talk about pseudo-history. Anyway, that's beside the point. Today, I'm going to talk about my 5 favourite pseudo-historicals. And even with that caveat, I think there are a couple which are going to be a little bit controversial. And the first of those controversies is going to come with number 5 on the list. And the reason it's going to be a bit controversial is that it is a Big Finish audio. But the one I want to talk about today is with my buddy number 5, Peter Davison, in it. It is written by Nev Fountain. It is, as a lot of Nev Fountain's stories tend to be, a very, very funny episode of Doctor Who, and it is called The Kingmaker. In this episode, the Doctor ends up investigating the mystery of the princes in the tower. It's actually quite hard to talk about The Kingmaker without talking spoilers, but we have some fantastic elements. We have a recurring character making a surprise guest appearance. I'll say no more. We have Richard III, who sounds more like Chris Eccleston's Doctor than Chris Eccleston does. We have the mystery of the prince is solved. We have Doctor Who's book contract. It's madness, but it's very, very funny, and I do recommend it. Next up, and also probably quite controversial, is Patrick Troughton's last story, The War Games. I continue to be impressed by The War Games. This is a 10-episode Doctor Who story. It is quite a lot of I've been captured, I've escaped, I've been captured, I've been escaping, with all sorts of different historical periods on show. Because the idea, central conceit of The War Games, and minor spoilers on this, is that an alien race has brought humanity from different periods of war throughout its history to fight together to find ultimate soldiers to recruit into their own battles. The thing that impresses me about The War Games is, despite it being 10 episodes long, despite quite a bit of repetition in the plot, I find it a really compelling story. I really get sucked into it, and I really do enjoy it. And the end of The War Games is when we first see the Time Lords in action. And I don't think the Time Lords have ever been scarier or more mysterious than they were in The War Games. Going further back into the lore of the show, number 3 on the list is the William Hartnell story, The Time Meddler. Now, it's set in somewhere north of England, I assume, during a very historically inaccurate Viking raid, and we encounter the very first person on the show, other than the Doctor, to have access to a TARDIS. This character, the meddling monk as he becomes known, is our first glimpse into the Doctor's backstory. And apparently I like comedy, because it's quite a funny show, and expansion to Doctor Who lore in my historicals, because like The War Games, we see the first glimpse of an element from the Doctor's past in it. The only New Who episode on my list today comes in at number 2. So the one I've plumped for from New Who is The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances. The Christopher Eccleston story, which introduced us to the very scary gas mask zombies, the creepy, "Are you my mummy?" catchphrase, which freaks me out a little bit even now. It is a glorious show, really steeped in World War II, much better than later visitations like Victory of the Daleks. It really plays with the setting. The story is inherent to that setting, and it is just one of the best things that New Who has done. Coming in at number 1 on my list is the most historical of my historicals today. It is another episode with my favourite, number 5, Peter Davison, and it features the rather cool, if slightly cumbersome, costume for the Pteroleptals and the very disco killer android working for them, who does a nice bit of disguising himself as Death incarnate for a number of the episodes. It has a brilliant guest character in Richard Mace, who is a kind of poacher come highwayman come raconteur come travelling actor. He's a very entertaining character, very well played in the episode. And the Doctor saves the day at the end of the day, but essentially causes the Great Fire of London. And the conceit of putting the Doctor into a historical event like that is quite a strong one. So that's my list of 5. Let me know what I've missed. Let me know which you would rather have included on there. Let me know why I should have always gone with historicals, not pseudo-historicals. And join me next week when I will do a follow-up Friday based on whatever we get from Spiders in the UK, the next episode of Doctor Who. Thanks for watching. Cheers.